Well, it's J.J. Abrams' fault. Boy, we have been saying this for, I don't know, years now. And Screen Rant now is finally saying that the problem with Star Wars Disney trilogy is the writing and the lack of a plan. Well, here we go. This is coming from Screen Rant. And it says, Star Wars' biggest sequel trilogy problems are J.J. Abrams' fault. So J.J. is the fall guy. Now, we'll go through this. There's some things, to an extent I agree, but it's not only his fault. This doesn't all rest at the hands or at the feet of J.J. Abrams. This is bigger than that. So, here we go. Many of the problems present in the Star Wars trilogy are J.J. Abrams' fault, and some can be traced back to The Force Awakens. J.J. Abrams is responsible for the biggest problems in the Star Wars trilogy. When he signed on to helm the film that would become The Rise of Skywalker, Abrams became the first person, other than Lucas, to direct multiple Star Wars movies. His first outing in the galaxy far, far away was 2015's Force Awakens, so he obviously played a large hand, for better or worse, in molding the trajectory of the Star Wars trilogy's narrative. While The Force Awakens was well received, save from the critics saying it was too similar to A New Hope, The Rise of Skywalker earned decidedly mixed reviews and became the lowest performing installment of the trilogy at the box office. Despite the reactions to The Rise of Skywalker, Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi arguably remains the most divisive Star Wars movie of all time. Arriving 2 years after The Force Awakens, the film proved to be extremely polarizing thanks to a series of bold creative choices that subverted expectations. Ooh, subverted expectations! That's the only thing he wanted to do. And attempted to help Star Wars grow. The Last Jedi's most vocal detractors claim Abrams and co-writer Chris Terrio were forced to course correct on The Rise of Skywalker as they tried to fix some of the perceived problems with The Last Jedi, but in actuality, the overarching issues present in the sequels can be traced back to Abrams. It isn't just what Abrams and company did on The Rise of Skywalker, which was hit with criticism for retconning aspects of The Last Jedi. That was also hit with praise from some people who liked it. That was the one thing that said, well, at least they retconned The Last Jedi, so it can go both ways. That door swings both ways. He unknowingly laid the foundation for the trilogy's more problematic events with decisions he made during development of The Force Awakens. There. This is the one right there. One of the biggest ones. Originally, The Force Awakens creative team wanted to make Luke a bigger part of the narrative, but they felt he always overshadowed the new characters that were supposed to be the leads of the trilogy. Well, then why didn't they just make Luke the lead of the trilogy? If he's overshadowing him, then he's a larger force to be reckoned with, and it's most likely what the audience wants to see. So they opted to have Luke disappear after failing to start a new Jedi Order, and Skywalker was only in the film's final scene. This didn't sit well with some fans who wanted to see Luke have a reunion, of course, with Han and I would say Leia. We want the original three back together. My goodness, why couldn't we have got that? That's the one thing that you must do if you're getting the original crew back. You gotta have them together in a scene. I would say an entire movie, but at least a scene, multiple scenes. The Last Jedi looked to flesh Luke's character out, which ended up being one of the most controversial parts of the entire movie. Longtime viewers couldn't believe the optimistic, idealistic hero from the original trilogy had become a jaded cynic, willing to spend the rest of his existence cut off from the universe. Very hard to believe that. Putting aside the fact time invariably changes people, Johnson didn't have much of a choice. Yes, he had a huge choice. There was no way anyone would have guessed that Luke had gone to that island to give up and just throw it all away from the ending scene of The Force Awakens. Rian Johnson decidedly took the approach of having Luke become a failure and a loser on that island. He didn't have to do that. You could have had him go off looking for Jedi artifacts and still optimistic, still trying to find something. Maybe he was trying to get a little more information on Snoke and the unknown regions where he came from, because apparently they did say in Rise of Skywalker he did travel the unknown regions, and I think we have a comic now where him and Kylo Ren, or Ben Solo, do that exact thing. So there could have been many other ways to take this. We've been talking about this for 2 years now. The different things you could have had Luke do, which still would have had him, away for the first movie, but brought him back, in a Jedi Master-esque sort of way. But he didn't do that. It was intentional. So it was the deconstruction of Luke Skywalker, the hero. That's what they were trying to do. If Luke had immediately answered the Resistance call and faced down the First Order with a laser sword, it would have made his exile extremely contrived. Yes, but again, he didn't have to exile himself because he wanted to cut himself off from the Force. And when he does decide to force project himself there, and I guess force projection also means you can project lightsabers and dice and like anything else. So you're just like coming up with things out of thin air. Force projection, that's a whole other issue. Well, what exactly is it? Do you just project yourself? You can change your appearance. You can make things appear that aren't really there. It's like you're creating a phantom. Anyway, there needed to be weight and meaning behind Luke's decision to remove himself from the fight, so Johnson added more to the story between Luke and Ben Solo, using the youngster's turn to the dark side as the reasoning for Luke's state of mind. It provided the foundation for Luke's sequel arc, which still doesn't sit well with some, I'd say most, viewers. And then here we have Abrams split up the main heroes. In the build-up to Rise of Skywalker, much was made of how the film would finally feature Rey, Finn, Poe Dameron sharing significant screen time with each other, whereas Luke, Han, and Leia developed relationships over the course of the original 3 movies. This was the first time the sequel's trio of leads would be teamed up. In the 3rd movie, the first time they actually team up. Many consider this to be one of the new movie's biggest missed opportunities. Even with the sequel trilogy cast bemoaning the fact that they didn't work together very much on the films. But considering how much of the events of The Force Awakens, it's hard to see what else the filmmakers could have done. Had a plan, had an outline for 3 movies, cohesive stories, had better writers, had one writer that wrote all the scripts. That's just a couple things they could have done. I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy. Abrams split up the main trio in the first act when he separated Finn and Poe after the TIE fighter crash in Jakku. Rather than having Finn and Poe meet up with Rey, the Scavenger only crossed paths with the former. By the time Finn and Poe reunited at the Resistance base on Dakar, Rey had been taken prisoner by Kylo Ren. Then, of course, Rey found Luke in Force Awakens' final moments, meaning she'd have spent a significant chunk of time in The Last Jedi on Ahch-To with her reluctant teacher trying to get him to be a Jedi again. Because of that, she was away from Finn and Poe for the majority of the film, getting only a satisfying... And even Finn and Poe, they weren't even together. They threw Finn with Rose Tico on some crazy, stupid mission to a casino planet, which didn't make any sense. It didn't end up... It was totally unnecessary because the point of that never happened in the first place, or it never ended up happening. So that whole casino was a Canto bite. Oh man, that scene bites. Tell you that. There wasn't a real opportunity to have her go on an adventure with the other two and flesh out their dynamic. It's easy to point the finger at The Last Jedi, but Force Awakens is the guilty party here. It's kind of defending Last Jedi a little too much because Rian Johnson definitely did not need to take these characters in this story the way he did. It was a snub at what JJ had set up. Yeah, sure, JJ didn't set up a lot for him to go off of. He left a lot open, but where Rian decided to take that, also intentional and didn't help anything. And then here we have the mystery box. Here we go. This is pretty much probably what I'm talking about. Anyone who's been following Abrams' career for any length of time knows he loves his mystery box. While there is an admirable quality to that, it can oftentimes get the director into trouble. John Harrison in Star Trek Into Darkness is perhaps the most famous example, but there's also a few present in Star Wars. In fact, Rey's heritage, Supreme Leader Snoke's backstory, lack of backstory, were the two plot points fan theorized for months leading up to Force Awakens, leading up to The Last Jedi. who will raise parents and where does Snoke come from? Who is he? They held the most prevalent. That was the two most biggest fan theories between Force Awakens and Last Jedi, and we didn't get any answers. We still haven't got any real satisfying answers. The answers we got added more questions and were really pathetic, to say the least. The only problems with that film did little to nothing to provide any clear resolution, leaving it up to Johnson to figure out. Rian Johnson, they're kind of painting him as the hero here, which, or not the hero, but that it's not his fault. But I think blame is a two-way street here. Granted, making things up as they go along is Star Wars tradition. The original trilogy was not set in stone when George Lucas sat down to make the first film. But he had a plan, he had an outline, he wrote all three movies. It's a world of difference here. At the same time, it helps to have some semblance of a plan, thank you, Screen Rant, to stick to as a guideline. In retrospect, it feels like Abrams toyed with the idea of making Rey a Palpatine in The Force Awakens, but stuck too close to the mystery box mantra and didn't do anything to concretely set that up. I don't remember how he alluded to Rey being a Palpatine in The Force Awakens. I don't know. If you guys do, let me know in the comments. I don't remember thinking, I wonder if she's a Palpatine. I don't remember that. Without a real course to follow, Johnson decided to make Rey's parents nameless nobodies, which was different from what Abrams had in mind. What ended up happening was The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker were seemingly at odds with each other, thanks to their mixed messaging about Rey's parents. As for Snoke, what little of a history learned in the trilogy comes off as a throwaway line of dialogue in the third film, after the first two failed to properly explain him. Abrams decides to bring back Palpatine. Another huge mistake. When the Rise of Skywalker teaser trailer surprisingly revealed Emperor Palpatine was back in the fold, Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy was quick to state the villain's return was always part of the sequel trilogy's plan. The specifics behind the Emperor's resurrection were undetermined. They just knew Palpatine was the endgame. Considering what's been revealed about the original Star Wars 9, Colin Trevorrow's Duel of the Fates, that seems difficult to believe. Trevorrow's script did not include a role for Palpatine, who was just mentioned by name. Instead, made Kylo Ren the primary villain, which makes sense. He was the villain in the first movie. He was leading up to be the main guy, especially after kill Snoke off. Considering Trevorrow was hired for Star Wars 9 in 2015, odds are he would have been privy to any impending Palpatine return and worked that into his screenplay. Yes, I completely agree with that. By all accounts, Palpatine's comeback was Abrams' idea, but unfortunately the director didn't have much of an explanation as to how that happened. After some classic Star Wars opening, hand-crawl waving, Palpatine's back broadcast to the galaxy, plot point scene in Fortnite, I might add, the film proper only pays lip service to Abrams' favorite prequel scene by having Palpatine repeat his famous line about the dark side and unnatural abilities. Sadly, Palpatine's role in The Rise of Skywalker is undercooked. His connections to Rey and Kylo Ren are half-baked at best. The idea of Palpatine's return is a logical one, as it makes him the singular thread that ties, which should have been Anakin Skywalker, the thread that ties everything together, but they made it Palpatine now. Oh my goodness. Okay, this is about it. The Knights of Ren, it goes on to talk about the Knights of Ren, how they were unutilized, and basically it boils down to the fact that finally there are news sources that are reporting that, hey, maybe it's the writing. Maybe it's not bigotry and male chauvinism and racism and all this other crazy stuff that we've been called, and in the last few years of us speaking out against how bad the movies were, but how ill-planned they were. And you got Screen Rant here saying that, yes, they were ill-planned. It would have been nice to have a plan or an outline, and, maybe collaboration between both the directors, JJ and Johnson. They kind of made Johnson seem like a little bit of a, wasn't his fault. JJ's a scapegoat. But ultimately, it's Kathleen Kennedy's fault, too. She was the president of Lucasfilm. She's the one who greenlit all this without having a plan or an outline for where this was going to go. And then she says, Palpatine was always part of the plan. It wasn't, because Colin Trevorrow did not have him, other than I think it was a hologram or a voice, something like that, message. That's the only reference to Palpatine in his script. So there you have it. little by little, people are starting to come around and say, okay, maybe the movies, maybe they're not that good. Maybe they weren't that well written. Maybe they don't make sense. We've been saying it for years now. So welcome on board. I guess welcome to the Phantom Menace. All right, guys, let me know what you think of the article. And thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't. And until next time, lock the doors and hope they don't have blasters.